All right, I think we can begin. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'll introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Lisa Cubbins. I'm a Senior Vice President on the Communications and Public Affairs team in Central Canada, and I'm joined by my colleague Andrew Enns, who is the Executive Vice President in Central Canada. So we welcome you today to Reputation 2025. This year's the 28th edition. So Leger's reputation study provides a comprehensive sectoral analysis of reputation for more than 326 companies across 30 sectors. And we conduct it among more than 38,000 Canadians using Leger's Leo panel, of course. Our data collection, as it is every year, took place between mid-November and ended on January 20th. And that is the timing we use each year. So we remind you that there is a question period at the end of the session, and we ask you to use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen if you have a question. Questions totally welcome, so let's begin. All right. So why does reputation matter? Why are we so preoccupied with it here at Leger? We know that companies that have a better reputation attract more customers, including their attention plus their spending, and customers are more forgiving of these companies when they make mistakes if they have a good reputation. The inverse is also true. When companies have weaker reputations, customers are looking to disassociate from them or look for other alternatives. So today we'll start with the broader reputation landscape and how Canadians were feeling in the final months of 2024 and the beginning of 2025. Then we'll explore our 2025 rankings. And finally, we'll walk through how Trump's inauguration and the resulting US-Canada tensions have affected reputation, particularly for American brands. So just quickly to talk about our methodology. So Leger's reputation model that we've been using for the past 28 years is really based on one question. Do you have a good opinion, a bad opinion? Do you not know the company enough to have an opinion? Or do you not know the company at all? So this score is a simple equation of good opinion minus bad opinion. So from that, the score can range from plus 100, where everybody knows your company and everybody has a good opinion, to minus 100, where everyone knows you and does not like you. Scores fluctuate for a number of reasons from year to year, so it's important to understand what is behind the score. So there's obviously more to reputation than just that simple question. So we want to be able to tell our clients where are they thriving, how can they improve, how do they compare to their competitors. So through years of studying reputation, we've determined that the key pillars of reputation are financial success, social responsibility, honesty and transparency, quality of products and services, innovation, and attachment. And the importance that each of these pillars, the importance of each of them depends on the sector. So in the minds of Canadians, innovation is going to be more heavily weighted in a category such as pharmaceuticals or technology. So now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Andrew to set the context that was the backdrop for this year's study.
Thanks very much, Lisa, and thank you all for joining us on this webinar. So, as Lisa pointed out, this data we've collected is largely based on the opinions that Canadians formed over the year 2024, and it was a year of lots of activity, lots of corporate activity that likely has some bearing on reputation. We saw grocery store CEOs hauled before Parliament to explain, their pricing and some of the challenges around affordability that dominated Canadians' opinion. Our letter carrier and prime deliverer of parcels and mail ran into some labor difficulties, in the latter part of 2024 that certainly made the headlines and generated some public attention. And of course, housing and things like that, generally was, percolating the news, particularly in our larger centers, Vancouver, Toronto, Calgary, where, the market was struggling. And then I would say in the backdrop of this was also a period of time where Canadians were disgruntled with their current federal government. and even with some provincial governments. It was in the electoral cycle, it was a harder time for incumbent governments. They tended to, either get themselves unelected or struggle mightily to get reelected. In terms of the issue matrix, and this was, even though there was the ups and downs in terms of some high profile issues, the issue matrix remained fairly constant throughout 2024. We saw inflation, affordability, cost of living. Those mentions dominated our research. We tracked this fairly regularly through the year. And so that was sort of your top of mind issue, followed by housing affordability, again, tied to that, just the ability to afford living in general. And then we had the, kind of a perennial healthcare. And then there would, the fourth issue, in this poll that we're showing you here toward the end of 2024, immigration had surfaced. Lots of talk about immigration at different parts of the year. But honestly, at different times, crime could make its way into the top four as well. So it was, but by and large, these top three really didn't change much throughout 2024. So now moving to our reputation study itself, it's a big study. We include a lot of companies. We group these into 30 different sectors, that are displayed here, on the screen in front of you. Obviously, way too many sectors, way too many companies for us to do justice in the time we have in the webinar. But I mean, obviously, each of these sectors, we've got a number or a varying number of companies represented within the sector. And we have the winners and sort of the movers, the winners, the losers in each sector. And we go from the cerebral, the books, the indigo does very well there. The fun categories of brewery and cannabis, Molson's and Aurora makes its way there. And of course, if we're going to get into those fun categories, we talk about restaurants. A&W has a good year in that category. And even the serious, the insurance, where we see CAA. So we've got lots of data. We're going to give you some highlights, in this webinar, but certainly there's lots more available to you in the full report. In terms of sort of some of the movement, I would say, looking at reputation, and looking at how company and corporate reputations were impacted over 2024, generally speaking, it was, we would say this is a reasonably stable year. There was some movement, but not wild movement overall. We see a few sectors on the upswing, automobile by, an average of 4 points, the bank, the credit union sector, a couple points. Lots of stable sectors, energy, some of those larger companies, the food industry, and then some declining sectors, but again, not massive declines even in the sectors. Drugstores, shipping, restaurants, see some decline, but not, I would say, and Lisa would be able to speak to this, much more in terms of her experience over the number of years we've been doing this, but not one of our more wild sort of years in terms of reputation. That's not to say that there weren't some significant movement when you break it down by company. And we'll say, I mentioned it in our, in my opening remarks around some of the issues and headlines. Canada Post did dominate sort of the headlines that latter part of 2024. And it would have captured a bit of the strike and some of that even post-strike period when we were in field doing our data collection. And you can clearly see the sensitivity of our research and the impact that these events have on Canada Post. It was a significant decline. And obviously it's a well-known brand, and it's also a brand that really touches every Canadian in some form or fashion. Along some of the other, I get to share the bad news. Along some of the other companies that saw some negative movement in their reputation score, pardon me. We see, we saw the Canada Post. We see Boeing. Boeing still, 2024, there was probably still lingering some safety issues around their planes, but they were also in the news at various times in terms of some production issues and some senior leadership challenges. And then, of course, Boeing's trying to get into the space business, and it hasn't didn't go particularly well in 2024. TikTok's been in the news. You know, it's either being banned or it might be banned. Who knows? But it's certainly in the news and not for always good reasons. Tim Hortons and Lowe's. Lowe's obviously went through, you know, a brand that went through a transition by the end of 2024. So we see some of these big movers on the downward side in the companies. And I'm going to hand it back to Lisa to talk about some of these companies that went on the caught a little bit of wind in their sails.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, so on the flip side, Air Canada, Sunwing, and several auto brands rebounded. In part, this reflects better service post-pandemic, but also Canadians rewarding stability and value during uncertain times. Despite the 8-point jump Huawei's reputation score saw this year, it is still in the negative. So it is still at one of the bottom of the list with a score of -10. So they're climbing their way out of the basement there slowly but surely. We'll see if they make it to a positive side of the scale next year. And then we have Ticketmaster. So Ticketmaster is a new one on our list this year, obviously in the news a lot, so we decided to add it to our list. Not a brand, like not kind of an interesting brand to have on our list in general. So of the 326 companies that were on our list, only 8 companies have a negative reputation score. So we've already mentioned a few of those already. So Boeing, TikTok, Huawei, those 3 are in the negative. And this was Ticketmaster's first year on our reputation radar. And it's really a clear example of what happens when pricing, tech failures, monopoly frustration all converge. And of course, anyone who is trying to get Taylor Swift tickets, myself included, that chaos. And then you add in a data breach, it's really left a strong negative imprint. And first year on our list resulted in a negative reputation score of -11. So not a great start for Ticketmaster. So now the moment you've been waiting for is our big reveal. Who will be in our top 10? So at number 10, we have, let me reveal it, Toyota. So Toyota made it to the top 10 in 2009, and this is the first time it's been back since. So Toyota remains a benchmark for reliability, durability, value, and Canadians continue to admire its consistent performance and reputation for innovation in hybrids and sustainability. Home Depot. Home Depot made it to the top 10 in 2017 and has done so 2 times since. So Home Depot continues to benefit from that DIY trend that picked up steam in the pandemic and continues on. Dollarama. Dollarama made it to our top 10 in 2016 and has only missed it by a hair 1 year since. So that's a pretty good run in the top 10. It's a value-based success story. As Andrew mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, inflation, economic concerns are top of mind for Canadians. So not surprising that Dollarama continues to be admired for its affordability and making it into the top 10 still this year. Interac. So Interac, since we added it in 2020, it has always been in our top 10 4 out of the last 6 times, I should say. As digital payments grow, trust in Interac as a Canadian-owned brand remains quite solid. YouTube. So since we added YouTube in 2020, it has been in our top 10, like Interac, 4 out of the past 6 times. YouTube is the go-to source for entertainment, education, expression, especially among younger Canadians. Sidebar, if you want to know any more details on their success, go to check out our Leger Digital study that releases in the fall. Really great information about YouTube and anything Facebook. I just aged myself by mentioning Facebook first. Instagram, TikTok, all the rest of it. We have all of the details, so I really recommend that you check that out. So in the number 5 spot, Canadian Tire. So number 1 in 2021 and 2019, but always in our top 10. It's a brand that taps into our Canadian identity and nostalgia. Doesn't matter if you grew up in a big city or a small town, you probably got your first bike from Canadian Tire like I did. I, for one, am also super curious to see what happens to Canadian Tire moving forward. For those of you who watched last week's episode, so just 5 days ago, episode of Saturday Night Live, Mike Myers came out at the end wearing a T-shirt with a Canadian Tire logo to the rolling credits scene. So it was sort of exciting to see that. I actually rewatched the show to make sure it was real and not just an image someone had manufactured online. But he really did wear that shirt. So I'm curious if their reputation score goes up even higher with that Canadian pride we have going. Number 4, Google. So Google's been number one 8 times since 2012, but it's always in the top 10. So it's number 4 this year. To be honest, when I see the results, no offense to Google, I'm always happy when Google's not number 1 because it means the story has changed slightly this year. So this year there's some privacy concerns, but obviously Google still scores high for its usefulness, innovation, the essential part it plays in our daily lives. We use it like a verb. I'm going to Google that. I check Google Maps. It's very integral into our daily existence. Samsung also been in the top 10 since 2018. It's growing its ecosystem from phones to appliances, makes it even more of a household name. And Canadians admire the balance of quality, affordability that Samsung offers. Sony also very consistently in our top 10. It's an aspirational brand. It's a trusted name in quality electronics, especially among older folks and tech savvy Canadians. It might not be as flashy, but it's strong and steady. So now for the big reveal. Number 1 this year for its first time ever is Costco. So again, going back to affordability, Canadians consistently praise Costco for fair pricing, customer satisfaction. They are also really associated with great employee treatment and ethical business practices. And we will get to that more later about the employee score. So overall, this year's list shows reliability, value, trustworthiness, that they remain the cornerstones of reputation in the eyes of Canadians. So now we're going to take a look at the top Canadian companies. So then we look at our list to see what are our top 15 Canadian homegrown companies. Canadian Tire tops that list. So they're going to be hard pressed to see anyone beat them, although Interact's pretty close there because they are the number 7 spot in our top 10. Canadian Tire is the number 5, but they are our top Canadian company. So we see other brands we know that are household names: McCain, Maple Leaf, Shoppers Drug Mart, Winners, Marks, Cineplex is in there, Indigo, Andrew mentioned earlier, CAA, Purolator, so all Canadian strong brands. So now we're going to get into the employer score. So let me explain what goes into our employer reputation score. It's a little more complex than our straight up reputation score, but it does include the awareness piece that comes from our reputation score. So in order to be considered a good employer, Canadians have to know that you exist and that you are an employer, that you need to be on someone's consideration set. So how do people feel about the working atmosphere? Is it seen as a good place to work? So we do ask this question among all Canadians because we want to get a sense of people's perceptions, not just people who actually work there. We'd probably be pretty hard pressed to find some NHL employees that are willing to take our survey. But what do people think of the NHL as a good employer? I'm sure most people think of actual hockey players, and a lot of Canadians probably aspired to be one of those, so obviously would want to be employed by the NHL. But we always see the tech companies up here. They're known for their fun work environments, the endless smoothies and avocados and all of the rest of it, foosball. So they are constantly in there as top employers. The campuses they have in the U.S. But we also look at would people be eager to work there? If you're retired, would you recommend any of these places as a place to a grandchild, a child? And that in what weighs really heavily in this ranking, especially for young people, is whether the company's ethics and practices align with your personal views. So we see that in other studies that we do. We have our youth study as well at Leger, and we're seeing more and more that younger Canadians wouldn't consider working for an employer that doesn't have the same ethics and practices that align with their values. So yeah, so we see many of our top 10 companies in our top employers, or Google, Costco, and then Apple is the one that's sort of an outlier here because they've never made our top 10 list because there's so many people that dislike Apple that we have a lot of detractors, but people still recognize it as a potential great employer. So now I'm going to hand it back to Andrew to take us through what happened right when we stopped data collection of our reputation study.
Thanks, Lisa. That was great. Interesting to see some of the movement with brands. So yeah, I mean, as Lisa talked, our data collection window, starts at the end of 2024 and sort of wraps up, midway through January of 2025. And so obviously, somewhere around that mid-January, alarm bells started going off in all around the world, but in particular Canada with the approaching inauguration and eventual inauguration of President Trump. And he weighed in with, obviously, I don't think I need to go into great detail here, but certainly his comments with respect to Canada becoming the 51st state, his comments with respect to referring to the Prime Minister as Governor Trudeau, and just other general sort of aggressive commentary coming out of there. Certainly caught the attention of Canadians, and we started to see this, manifest around certain emotions, and immediately, obviously at Leger, we got in and we're tracking very regularly. We've got a Trump tariff tracker that we're doing on a weekly basis, but we also realized that some of the implications are going to spin onto sort of corporate reputation. And obviously, the timing of this presentation, there'd be the obvious question, like, what's the potential impact? So the first thing to understand is what's happened to the issue matrix. It gives you the first clue of that this really captured Canadians' attention. So we had what was on the screen before. We had sort of what we finished 2024 on, which was inflation, housing affordability, healthcare. All of a sudden, a new topic burst onto the scene in terms of top of mind issue of Canadians, in terms of the most important issue, the one they're talking to their friends and family about. And it's tariffs, Trump, just US aggression in general. And not just at that 18-20% that we saw the top issue dominating people's attention back in 2024, but we're up in 32%. Like, it's extraordinary how it's taken over the conversation within Canada. And obviously it's taken over the conversation within the federal election that we're currently having. But it's really captured the attention of Canadians. And in a way, it's propelled this Canadian pride as well. I asked a question for a media client, during Canada Day events in 2024, July 2024, question around how prideful they are as Canadians. I re-asked that question early February once Mr. Trump had become president and some of his comments had sunk in. And we saw an astounding jump in the pridefulness of Canadians. There was really a nationalist, patriotic fervor that sort of has grabbed our population and grabbed hold of the consumers. And here's we'll show you sort of the impact in terms of what that means. We'll sort of start by looking at this. We'll come at this a couple ways. But we thought, we wanted to look at some big American brands. Well, what better way to pick out a few big American brands is identify some of the big American corporate giants in terms of they're hanging around Mr. Trump these days. These are a number of them that showed up for the inauguration on January 20th. Starting to my left, we got Mr. Zuckerberg. We've got Jeff Bezos of Amazon. We've got Sundar Pichai from Google. And of course, the ubiquitous Elon Musk there, who we certainly get no shortage of these days. So let's look at these brands. So you look at the friends of Trump, and you look at the pre-Trump reputation scores And then you look at the gray post-Trump reputation scores, and you see Google at, dropping, probably not as, the least of the bunch, obviously, because Google is still a big part of our lives. Amazon takes quite a hit. There may be other factors. We'll talk about them in a little bit, but you see Meta, Facebook, a significant drop. Tesla, ouch. I mean, for those of you online who own Tesla stock, my condolences. It's a tough one. And certainly, even X, the old Twitter, we see it declining. So certainly there's an immediate reaction of Canadians with respect to some of these well-known, American corporate brands, and the fact that their ownership is quite not shy about their association with the president. We carry on and look at a few things in greater detail. Obviously, we thought we'd share this with you because the automobile industries come up a lot in the last couple months with respect to President Trump and the tariffs, and it's been quite a topic. And so we looked at, well, what's that doing to the brands? The automobile brands themselves are holding pretty steady. Not a lot of difference in terms of the Trump and post-Trump kind of pre-Trump, post-Trump sort of impact. We see a few ups and downs. Again, largely American brands seem to take somewhat of a hit, but not necessarily. Toyota, for some reason, slides a bit, and GM holds its own. But then Tesla, we already pointed that out, clearly associated with a friend of the president, and clearly taking it on the chin in terms of its reputation. We'll take a look at at another friend. This one is another probably not well known. I mean, I actually someone had to tell me who this fellow was, although the Coke bottle gave it away a little bit. This is the head CEO of Coca-Cola, and he made much of his bottling a special branded bottle of Diet Coke for the president in honor of his inauguration. Well, we see Coca-Cola. I mean, pretty steady, pretty well-known American brand. I mean, Scott, obviously, there's, the Pepsi crowd is not really going to rate it high, but it's got its support. Well, it again, that special bottle of Diet Coke had its, there's consequences amongst the Canadian consumers, in terms of where its reputation took a dive, so far in March. We'll see where we end up at the end of the year. And then I think the last one I want to talk to is Amazon. We obviously saw Jeff Bezos in the photo. Amazon, ups and downs, and in our short sort of from our end of December finding to March, we see a very significant decline. Obviously, Jeff Bezos and Trump has been fairly active. I will also say we did probably pick up a bit more of that impact of the fallout on some labor decisions that made in the province of Quebec, which tended to pick up a little steam early in the new year and make a bit more of a national conversation. So maybe more factors in here than just the president, but certainly we see the implications of that, of his arrival, his aggression, or his perspective with respect to Canada, and that coinciding rise of national pride and nationalism and patriotism amongst the Canadian consumer. Lisa, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thank you. So as part of the Trump tariff tracker, we've been tracking changes in Canadian behavior. Are people not or trying to avoid buying American products, shopping in American stores? You saw the decline of Amazon. We've been tracking if people are, paring back what they're buying from Amazon, trying to shop local. But one of the things that we asked is, have you canceled your streaming services like Prime, Disney Plus, Netflix? I, for one, am super surprised that the result that we've seen is that 19% have actually canceled their subscription services. That's one thing that I would probably struggle with personally. But we are seeing, 19% are canceling their services, but we see like a huge drop in their reputation score from December to March. So Netflix has kind of plummeted a bit in the past. This juncture here at March 2023, that was that whole password sharing thing that they released where you weren't allowed to share passwords anymore, and their score really dropped, as well as a price hike, I think, at the same time. So right now they're also talking about a price hike, but they're also likely suffering from the Canadian pride in Canadian things and trying to, get further away from American companies. So, all right, and here we see as well some of the big American companies that kind of represent convenience for a lot of us: McDonald's, Starbucks on many corners of our cities, Walmart, Costco, convenience. They have a lot of items. You could do one-stop shopping. We saw Amazon's their reputation score really take a nosedive. But these companies have also seen a nosedive in the past couple of months. So Costco dropped by 11. So they are number one still in our study this year, but the number one company dropped 11 points. Then we see Walmart dropped even further, 19 points. McDonald's dropped 22 points, and Starbucks also dropped 22 points. So Canadians are making different choices here, and we've seen that in our tariff tracker about avoiding these types of companies, and we're seeing it in the perception Canadians have of actually dealing with these companies. So looking back at our top 10 list, so this was our top 10, still is for this year's study. We know that there are obviously points in time that are going to affect reputation as a whole. That's why we track it year over year, and why some of our clients track it multiple times a year, because they recognize that the industry they're in has more ups and downs. So we can see how did our new data collect affect these companies. Costco, we know, dropped by 11. Sony also dropped by 12. Samsung also by 11. Google dropped even further by 16. Canadian Tire went up 4 points. YouTube dropped 16 points. Intrac up by 3, so another Canadian company. Dollarama went down by 2. That one I was a little bit surprised at, but I'm not sure that all Canadians really recognize Dollarama as a Canadian company. And we have Home Depot went down by 9, and then lastly, Toyota took a little drop to 7 points down. So we're seeing some impact on these top 10 most admired brands. So as Andrew said earlier, we have been tracking how proud people are to be Canadian, and this is the number that he said has gone up. So this is the current pride in being Canadian overall. This number is higher among older folks. Younger folks are a little bit less likely to say that they are proud to be Canadian, but 85% is a strong number. I, for one, am certainly in that grouping. And then, so ending on a Canadian note, so Canada Post, top of our webinar, we talked a lot about how Canada Post did a big decline with the strike, and it impacted their reputation. But now, probably helps them that Canada is in the name. They went up to a score of 40, so a huge rise in their reputation score with our most recent data collect. So they damaged their reputation, but Canadian pride and maybe a short memory has seen its rating begin to rebound. And the good work that the folks at Canada Post are doing to rebound in this time. But obviously nice to see that for them, that they have worked to recover that reputation. So now, just going back, so for an in-depth analysis of our reputation with competitors and sectoral analysis based on our 6 core pillars, which are financial strength, social responsibility, honesty and transparency, quality attachment, and innovation. Or if you want to do a deeper dive and use our diagnostic study to understand which factors specifically drive your company's reputation, reach out to solutions at leger360.com. If Canadians as a whole aren't your key stakeholders, we can also use our reputation model and customize the sample. We do a lot with universities and look at their current students, alumni, faculty. That obviously is going to be hard to capture in a GenPop Canadian study. We customize the sample or the scope to meet your research objectives. We also do a lot in the hospital sector, where we hone in on a catchment area and talk to residents who live close to a hospital to get a sense of their reputation. So our reputation model is so portable, it can be used for a number of different sectors, including the ones we've showcased here today. So after the webinar, you will receive a recording of a recording of the webinar, if you are so inclined to rewatch, and our booklet, which includes the full Canadian ranking and our hot takes on reputation this year. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go to questions. So we have some questions here. Does our survey cover the NGO sector? It doesn't. We've considered doing it in the past, but like I said, I've done work in this sector, but it's been more targeted and more niche. So it's possible the reputation model certainly work, but not not included in our Canadian list. We have Alan Middleton, a long friend of Leger, wrote the book Reputation Matters. He said he's surprised to not see Shoppers Drug Mart. Yeah, they've dropped a little this year. They really hit their heyday in the pandemic and have dropped a little since then. Somebody asked any reason Tim Hortons not included in this, and that might have been at the time I was showing Canadian companies. Tim Hortons has actually been bought by a Brazilian company. Looking at other questions. How often is this survey conducted? I wonder if 2025 results would be very different due to the shift in preference to Canadian-made products and services. So yes, certainly we conduct it once a year, but often go into field for clients specifically throughout the year. And we did go on to highlight results that were post Trump's inauguration, and we went through the results there.
Will be just on that, Lisa. It will be interesting to see. I mean, we've got that sort of immediate Trump impact, probably at the most intense period. Obviously, we even picked up, some of the election energy that's around, and which heightens emotions. It'll be interesting when we go and do our regular reputation study, which is typically, we get into field sometime in December and wrap up early January. Not only looking at it from the year over year of 20, of the data that we presented today, but even to take a look at that little period, that little snapshot we took in that period, will provide some interesting insights in terms of the emotional impact on reputation and how long it lasts, and what, and is there a rebound to that person's question? Does it, as the year goes on, and the emotion tends to abate a bit, and maybe the whole tariff thing works its way through. How does that pull or affect the reputation, particularly of some of those American brands that we tracked in this early kind of special survey that we did.
Yeah, absolutely. So Cameron Steed asked, do you correlate these consumer-facing brands' reputation trends against stock performance or quarterly financial results? And yes, we have done that in the past. And I think there was a whole white paper that was written on it, correlating the trend of Maple Leaf Foods during their crisis with their stock price, and it matched exactly. So yes, our reputation study is a good match for that, and I think the two kind of work together to, obviously it makes our study seem legitimate, or it gives us more pride in our study, knowing that it does correlate so closely with that.
I would say, in this environment, the stocks might be more, quicker to respond to certain things than maybe, Canadians' opinions regarding the reputation of the company, given what's been going on in the stock market the last 5 or 6 days.
Yeah. And we had somebody ask, I'm sorry if this has been addressed, but do you see reputation drop, example for Netflix, correlate to a drop in subscription or revenue? Not positive about revenue, but certainly like in terms of what we're tracking with our Trump tariff tracker, we're seeing 1 in 5 Canadians saying that they're dropping their subscriptions. So that would correlate with the drop in reputation as well. I will ask Andrew this question. If you were advising a US company to boost their reputation in the current moment, what would you tell them?
Well, I mean, again, depending on the nature of the business, but Canadians, first of all, they want respect. They feel partly what's generated some of the prideful, feeling in our country is a perception that we've been disrespected by the president and even some folks in his administration. So I think from a corporate perspective, you want to be, demonstrate respect for the Canadian consumer. Transparency is important if you're in the retail or sort of that front counter consumer perspective. Affordability in those concerns are still very paramount for Canadians, and so demonstrating value I think is really important. But certainly I think you can't pretend you're not American, and I think quite frankly Canadians in our research, we've asked questions. Canadians are most angry at President Trump and his administration. They're not, this isn't a broader sort of I hate Americans in general sort of sentiment. So I think there's still definitely room for good, strong American brands, but I think they need to take that sort of honest, respectful approach when they approach the Canadian consumer.
Thanks, Andrew. So had somebody ask, when will the recording be ready? And is the full list available past the top 10? So I can answer those two questions very easily. You will receive this afternoon a copy of the recording as well as a copy of our booklet. And the booklet includes the full list, the full ranking, as well as top companies by sector and a bit about our methodology, as well as mine and Andrew's editorial on reputation this year. So you will receive that today. Patricia asks, do you have the Canadian Pride scores pre-Trump to compare to the 85%? Andrew, do you remember the number, or is this something we'll get back to?
Oh, I think we could get back, but I have a feeling it was around the very prideful 85. I believe it was prior to that 70. I'm going to say 74 comes to mind, but we can certainly if there's a way we can get back to Tricia, we can certainly get back to her. I know the total prideful number was a combination of very prideful and somewhat prideful, and the very prideful number jumped up 18 points. So the intensity around that was quite extraordinary. I think the overall, if memory serves me, was somewhere in around the 9-point jump, overall, which again is quite significant in the sense that we've asked that question over year previously. It didn't change very much, but obviously, Mr. Trump hit a nerve.
And then we were also asked, can you share what the highest ranking number was for a bank in Canada? So the top in the FI category was Interact with a score of 69. And I can't remember who is after that. So we'd have to get back to you on that, but that would be in the booklet that you'll receive coming this afternoon. Somebody else asked about Tim Hortons not being included in the Canadian brand slide, which actually gets back to some of the questions we've been asking on our Trump tariff tracker now and again about perceptions of companies being Canadian, American, or other. And I think there is some ambiguity around Tim Hortons because it did change ownership in the last, I don't even remember how many years ago. So that is why it wasn't included. Yeah. But they have been advertising a lot, I think, about employing Canadians. Like they've been doing, I think a number of the brands that are not Canadian have been doing a lot of advertising about buying Canadian ingredients and employing Canadians to try to like offset the current sentiment. All right, if somebody asked if our organization is facing a reputational issue or is concerned about declining public perception, what are the most important first steps we should take? How do we assess the situation and determine the best course of action? Of course, call Leger and ask
for Lisa, of course,
and ask for a reputation study. The bonus for a lot of companies for at least 326 is that we have what your reputation score was pre whatever you're going through. We've had clients come to us who've gone through cyber attacks or various other issues. And the beauty is we know that their reputation scores dating back years, so we just kind of follow it through the crisis that they're facing, and until they feel like they're back on their feet, and then they get back to regular intervals. So yeah, could do a deep dive or could do a quick study. But yeah, reach out to us, either me, Andrew, or solutions at leger360.com. Anyone would be happy to help you. Specific insights on the retail sector. Andrew, you talked a bit about that with or one of us talked about it a bit with Walmart, Costco. Some of the bigger brands are taking a bit of a hit because they are in by and large American companies. Do we have any other insights on that from the tariff tracker?
Well, in terms of, I mean, certainly, you know, from the retail side, I mean, there is a growing sentiment, a stated sentiment. I always, you know, we ask people, are you trying to avoid purchasing American products? Are you, you know, looking to purchase more Canadian products? And we get very strong numbers. You know, 70% of Canadians are saying they're decreasing their purchase of American products, American services. I always preface that you know, it's a stated you know, kind of position. You know, I do a lot of the grocery shopping in you know, my household, and I can tell you, like, it's not easy trying to you know, deliberately buy Canadian, because everything's got a Canadian maple leaf, you know, imported by a proud Canadian company. So it doesn't really tell me I'm buying something that's Canadian made, and you know, likewise, trying to decipher, like, where does this product come from isn't always easy in terms of you know, so, but there is certainly, I would say, a general trend from a retailer that you know, the Canadian the products are you know, especially clearly Canadian, are being sought after. You know, I think from a reputation, I mean, some of those, you know, we still see some of the retailers that are value based doing quite well. You know, I think Walmart is clearly an American company, saw a dip, but it's still a place where for households it's an important you know, shopping option. Likewise, even for Costco, you know, it did decline, but it's still, again, it's an important for large families. So you know, and I think when I think retail reputation, you have to also understand in a lot of you know, urban centers, retailers were in the news for, you know, some of their struggles with crime and retail theft and shoplifting, which, you know, it would be interesting in a deep dive with some of these retailers, how that's sort of impacting the consumer's impression. I mean, they're seeing their business. They're probably going into some retailers now and seeing law enforcement at the doors, which, you know, I mean, I don't think you blame the retailer, but it does sort of enter your psyche a bit. So it's an interesting time, I think, in that sector.
Yeah. This question is for you, Andrew. Um, Someone likes your background and wants to know if the Jets will win the Stanley Cup this year.
Oh, my goodness. Finally, an easy question from the crowd. Of course, the Jets are going to win the Stanley Cup this year, although we have a big game to win tonight to start on our way.
Somebody else said, surprised not to see any of the Canadian telcos on the list. Where did they end up? Top of mind, they'll be in the list in the booklet that you will receive, but they weren't an outstanding story this year. They were in the past couple of years, with Rogers recovering from their outage. I think it was now 2 years ago. Was it even 3 years ago? I'm losing time here. But they didn't either have a big jump or a big decline. So we didn't have a story to tell about them this year, which is probably good for them. So can you share the top three companies that went up or down? So as you mentioned, the top three the three that went down the most were Canada Post, Boeing, and TikTok. And the ones that went up the most were Air Canada, Huawei, and then tied was LG, NHL, and Ford. So that was our movers and shakers. Did Loblaws come
I
up
think, you know,
anywhere?
when I think of Air Canada in terms of their movement, I mean, you know, I think they did a few good things, but I think, quite frankly, they probably stopped doing a few bad things that generated some, you know, some more attention than they would have wanted. And so it's an interesting sort of way, you know, it's not necessarily a company has to do something outstanding to move. It just maybe needs to stabilize and stop doing some bad things to see a bit of movement with respect to their impression of consumers.
Yeah, for sure. There is a comment or question. Interesting to see Google perform so well while other US tech companies had bigger drops. Do you have any insights to share around this? My perspective would be, exactly what we said at the beginning, like having a good reputation is something you can fall back on. Google's been in our top, been number one for so many years. They have such a great reputation that they are kind of resting on that. I would say, Andrew, let me know if you disagree. The fact that their CEO is not an Elon Musk or a Mark Zuckerberg, and just like he was in that picture, but I personally had to look up his name. He's just not a household name like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg. So I think that's probably, even though he was standing there with him, maybe not as recognizable as some of these other CEOs of these other big tech companies.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree, Lisa. Like, I mean, honestly, I had to kind of Google him to figure out who he was, which I'm sure is a bit, there's an irony in that somewhere. But no, he hasn't been certainly as as prominent. I mean, of that gang, I think really Elon Musk stands out. He took a position in cabinet. He's in addition to just his affection for the president and campaigning and all sorts of things on his behalf. He garnered some notoriety for slashing and firing people, like literally tens of thousands of people in an email, which is insane, I think. But and it's interesting, right? The immediate impact on whatever you could sort of find as a proxy to express negative, your displeasure. And clearly, I haven't seen the latest, the latest numbers, but certainly someone mentioned stock performance. His stock performance is not good. And I would suggest it tracks to the sales of Teslas and the fact that there's lots in different parts of Canada that are stocked full of Teslas and they don't know what to do with them.
Exactly. Somebody asked, do you think being in the field during Christmas/holiday season could skew the result because people are interacting with consumer products and retail companies? I would say the consistency is more important, that we are always in field during that time period is the most important. If we were to move the field window to a different time of year, we would definitely see more of a skew based on time of year. But the fact that we have kept it consistent for the past 28 years means that any sort of interaction that we might have would be steady over time. Also asked, when we went back into field in March, did we re-ask all the brands? We couldn't. There's 326 of them. So we asked, top 20 plus some that we thought would had been in the news. But we'll reach out and let you know if your company was on that list. But again, if anyone's interested, easy for us to go back in field using our weekly Omni to see how a company has fared over the last couple months. Alrighty, do you have this? Somebody asked the same question. How many years in a row did Interact top their category? That's another question I'll have to get back to you on, or we'll reach out after the webinar. Any notable differences among provinces? I mean, Quebec is always different. The webinar from this morning will be available or is available as well. And we highlight the Quebec results in isolation. And so there are certainly differences among Quebec, but we always see differences across the provinces. Our syndicated report that you can purchase highlights all of the regional differences for each company plus their competitors. So we do see some movement across the provinces when we dig into that.
It would be interesting on that point, Lisa, because especially when, I mean, it may not be in the final in the big report, but this patriotic fervor, this nationalism. We do see sort of some differences now, in the country in terms of the intensity of that. A little less intense in Alberta and Saskatchewan compared to certainly Ontario, for that matter, and certainly it's interesting in Quebec where, um, you know, the pridefulness of Canada was typically not as high. We saw that increase, likewise, it did across the country in Quebec as well. And, in our tracking, we've seen a dip in sort of the independent separatist movement. So that would be kind of interesting to look at some of those Quebec results to see whether or not that change in that perception has any transference to a perception of brand and particularly maybe even some Canadian brands that operate there.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great question. If the don't know it well enough is the largest pool of respondents for a company, so for a smaller brand, and the good, bad opinion responses are very small, do you still include the company in the rankings? Or were companies only included if the good, bad responses had a minimum pool size to be relevant? So that's a great question. No, we are interested in all companies. Part of our reputation, part of the score, part of our whole study is awareness. To have a good reputation score, Canadians need to be aware of you. And the sector that I always think of when I think of a small awareness is pharma pre-COVID, obviously. Their scores were always like score of 2 or a score of 3 because the good opinion was like maybe 10 minus the bad opinion was like 6%. So they always had really small scores and really low awareness. But then when COVID hit, the pharma companies realized that they really need to work on their awareness because they needed Canadians to buy in and be aware of their products in order to be willing to get vaccinated or willing to use their medication. So we've seen an increase in awareness and increase in reputation scores in that category. So that's a finding. If people don't know you well enough, we always say when we talk to our clients about reputation, that's the piece that don't know it well enough to have an opinion is the part of the of Canadians that you can capture. You can move them into good opinion. Bad opinion, Canadians who have a bad opinion of you are tougher to move to having a good opinion of you. So pharma, again, there's always a percentage of Canadians that don't like big pharma or are skeptical of big pharma. You're never going to move those people, or very rarely. But the ones that just don't know you well enough, they're ripe for the taking. They're the low hanging fruit. So, yeah, that's the journey. We try to get people to really, and we really focus in on that segment in our reporting. Like, who are they? Where do they get their information? What's their demographic? Like, how do our clients go after that coveted group of individuals? And we're coming up to the end. There's 2 minutes left. I'll throw this last question to Andrew, and then we will get back to everyone else who had a question. Any overall thoughts on Canadian energy, especially pre-post Trump?
Well, that's a good one. I don't really have those data points right at hand. I mean, obviously, energy is interesting. In 2024, it was, there wasn't a lot of news with respect to energy. I mean, there was a lot of news around a particular tax that impacted the sale of energy, and now in this election campaign, and with Mr. Trump, sort of challenging Canada and presenting Canada with some fairly significant, the potential for fairly significant economic challenges. There's been suddenly a renewed interest in our energy, in our resources, and the need to develop our energy and get these to markets as a way we can basically protect ourselves to some degree from the impact of Mr. Trump's trade moves. And so it will be interesting. I don't know. We didn't look at sort of some of those energy companies. We could get back to the individual and let you know in terms of what we saw. But it will be very interesting to see, because there's definitely the two main political parties in this election are talking a lot about energy, and a lot about fast tracking, projects, getting things up and going, and which has been a real challenge for the country for the last decade. And so, should that happen, I think we'll see a lot more activity, and therefore we could actually, to Lisa's earlier point about awareness, we could see, sort of energy, reputation with energy companies moving. I'm not sure which direction, quite frankly. It really depends in terms of how things go with these projects. But yeah, it's an interesting question, and certainly something to look forward to, in terms of next year's report, and seeing what happens with that sector.
Well, thank you, Andrew, for joining me, and thank you all for logging in today. So many good questions that we didn't get to. There was a lot of questions in the chat, but we will get back to you and look for our email with our reputation booklet and a recording. And if you have any questions, solutions@leger360.com or ask us. And have a great rest of your Thursday.
Excellent. Thank you all. Go Jets.